name is Meuli. I'm the program director at Dress for Success, and I have David Peeples here tonight with me. We are coming from Dress for Success Twin Cities out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. We are part of a program called Empower You, which is all about assisting women ages 18 and over in the Twin Cities, Minnesota area with their career advancement, with helping them through career development, connections, and clothing. So Dress for Success is a large international nonprofit, and the Dress for Success Twin Cities is a small affiliate of that large nonprofit that is all over the world. We focus on 5 areas that we call pillars of success, which include access, digital literacy, connection, building a positive network of support. Wellness includes our health and wellness programming. Stability includes our financial stability, financial literacy programs, and gaining influence through leadership development. So that's a little bit about our Empower You programming here at Dress for Success Twin Cities. I am Meuli, and I've been at Dress for Success now for 2 years. My favorite color is orange. I think I'm wearing the exact same shirt. No, it's a different color, but I seem to have a lot of orange shirts. I've been in career development going on. It is exactly 20 years. 2001 is when I started, and I'm really excited to be at Dress for Success. I've had the opportunity to work with David. This is actually our 3rd time, David, at 3 different organizations: Minnesota Career Development Association, Avivo, and now here David serves on our program committee. So I'm excited to introduce you, David. David is at Proof Alliance right now and had also been a director at an organization called Avivo that is based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and has a very long history of work, primarily in workforce development, but not necessarily all, so David, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background?
Sure. Currently now I'm associate director of programs with a nonprofit here in the Twin Cities called Proof Alliance. Our expertise is in basically providing support and prevention for families who have children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Before coming to Proof Alliance, I worked for another nonprofit called Avivo, and that's where I met and worked with Megan. There I was a program director for their community support programs. I've got about 15 years of nonprofit leadership experience, both in mental health, community outreach, and also in workforce development also. So I'm just glad to be here and looking forward to providing information and learning also. So.
Thank you, David.
Sure.
Right, I'll move on to the agenda here. Tonight, we are going to cover 4 areas: the definition of resilience, definition of restoration, something we call the art of rest, which is based on the research of Claudia Hammond and her team, and then the importance of connection and support in resilience. So I think resilience is probably one of the most used terms of 2020 and 2021. Am I right? Self-care, resilience, and I'm hearing the word trauma a lot because I think we're all going through, and we're all hopefully becoming more sensitive to everyone's life experience. All right, so let's talk about this concept of resilience that we keep hearing about. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's our ability to get through or to get back. It's our bounce back ability, really. And if you're talking about it from the sense of like a chemical compound, it's elasticity, right? It's plasticity, it's bounce back. It's coming back, which is really important to recovery. We're watching our communities, our economy, our workforce try to come back now too, right? And some of all of these different things is more resilient than others. The bounce back might take a lot longer in certain areas. For instance, hospitality, the food industry, restaurants. There's certain areas where it may not come back at all the way it was. But tonight we're really focusing on personal resilience, just to be, perfectly clear about that. So one thing I like to cover is the concept and the difference, because a lot of times we will confuse the concept of resilience with grit or endurance. And it's important to really articulate that grit, based on the research and work of Angela Duckworth, and I'll pop her video in just a minute. She wrote a book called Grit, is really about our ability to get through something tough, uncomfortable. It's our endurance. And resilience is a part of grit. It's but grit and resilience, even though they may be used as terms interchangeably, are actually different things. So what I love about this acronym is that grit is the combination of guts, resilience, which we're going to go deep into tonight, initiative, and tenacity. So tenacity, I think about is that bounce back piece and the endurance. David, do you have anything to add to any of these slides here?
One thing about grit is that what I have learned, particularly during this pandemic, is that many of the people that I serve really believe in this. And they didn't really realize that they had grit until they went through something, whether it was trying to find another job, whether it was trying to recover from an illness, or maybe the loss of a family member, or at one moment life was fantastic, and the next day life was not fantastic. So I've heard this word a lot more in the past year than I ever have before from the people that I'm serving, who at one time didn't think very much of the word grit, but now are really beginning to make it applicable to their lives. So.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of that. And I really agree in that sense of like self-discovery.
That's right.
Is that it's all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute, I was strong. I am stronger than I thought I was.
That's right.
I have more grit than I really thought I did.
Right.
Yeah, if you were to tell me in 2019 or before that I could live through a global epidemic and not die or end up in psychiatric lockdown forever.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have believed you. I would have just assumed it would be a horror movie and we're done. But we, like, as a world, we're not doing great. We're not doing perfectly, but we're getting through it.
That's right.
Most of us.
Yeah.
Most of us. Yep. That's a great point. So that, the definition of grit is really the one we're going to focus on is the second one. It's not grit as so much as, the stuff that's in a pearl that creates a pearl, even though that's a great metaphor here, right? Grit in our eye or stone or sand, but the courage, the resolve, the strength of character, that's the one we're going to really focus on in this moment. And then in psychology, grit is the term, the construct of it is a positive non-cognitive trait based on an individual's perseverance. That's a big term, perseverance, or a key term of effort combined with the passion for a particular long-term goal or end state. So Angela Duckworth talks a lot about the two words perseverance and passion in talking about grit. So just wanted to kind of bring in the bigger picture of grit, and then let's go deeper into resilience. So grit versus resilience. Resilience is the ability to easily recover from or adjust to misfortune or change. Wow, we're doing that. Grit is the passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Resilience is associated with optimism, perseverance, and self-control, whereas grit is associated with passion, resilience, courage, conscientiousness. So it's like just conscientiously making a choice, and perseverance. So I thought that was kind of a helpful grid there. So David, I'd love to ask you, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn off the share for just a moment. I'm going to grab Angela Duckworth's link because I forgot to add that to the slide, and ask you to talk about times where you have witnessed resilience in the individuals you have assisted in the various roles you've held in your career.
Sure, sure. I'd like to share 3 examples of resilience that I've experienced with people that I've served. One being when I was the director of a community support program that serviced people in the community who had severe and persistent mental illnesses. There was this one individual, we'll call him Bob, who went through a lot, in this particular time period that I want to share. Bob had a very severe mental illness and had been a part of the community support program because I had 3 different sites, and this one particular site was right not too far from downtown Minneapolis. And he had been part of this community support program site for at least 10 years, okay? And the one thing that kept him anchored was his love, participation in art. And I don't care, no matter what was going on in his life, he had housing issues. He would, focus and get into his artwork. He was also in recovery, okay? And was very active in maintaining his sobriety, attending support groups and networking, sharing his stories. And at one time period, it got very difficult for him to maintain his sobriety. And then he would, again, fall right back into his art again to keep him focused and maintained. He also had some health issues that was affecting him also. He didn't know what was going on, went to the doctor did various tests and so forth. And surprisingly, all 3 of these situations, his housing situations, his sobriety, and his health, were all affecting him all at once, at the same time, okay? And one thing that Bob did was he kept his focus on his art. And one day when he was walking to our community support center, he was walking by a leaf, and it was fall. And he just noticed how it was like a little puddle of water was on this leaf, and it caught his attention. He took a picture of it. Long story short, he took this picture, did some very incredible photography work with it and so forth, entered it into some type of statewide contest, and he won. And I remember when he won, he was so proud of his photo. And he said, what are the chances of me finding this leaf with this type of water accumulation on it, and for it to have the right coloring, the right light, to be this unique where I win a statewide competition. And I said, well, it's amazing, that, in all that you've been going through, all that is wrong happening in your life, you still have time to, as you're walking in one day, to focus on a leaf, on a sidewalk, on a curb, by a busy street. And he said to me, you know, art is what keeps me who I am. Art is what keeps me stabilized, you know, and without art, I don't know where I would be, you know. And to me, that's an example, one example of resilience that Bob would always talk about and focus on. You know, it was maybe 2 years later, and he would always say, "Hey, David, remember the leaf? Remember the leaf?" You know, whenever he had another crisis or issue going on, he would go back and say, art is my foundation, art is my anchor. So that's one story. Second story, also at this community support center, was a married couple. And for the most part, if you weren't paying attention, all you would say is that they came to our center there and they slept all day. They didn't get involved in programming. They didn't talk to anybody. Uh, However, one day as I was walking out of my office, I just engaged in a conversation with them. Hi, my name is David. What's your name? They shared their names, um, identified they had been at the Community Support Center for a number of years. And I said, well, fantastic. I said, well, what do you like about our programming? And how can we be better? And I'll never forget how the husband looked at me like, wow, no one's ever asked us that question before. And we just got into a conversation. So day after day, whenever I would see them, I'd say, hello, how's it going? Having a great day? And then I began to notice that they were very, very much involved in the program, but in their own way. So they would come there and they'd have a cup of coffee. At times we would have like a cooking group down in our kitchen. So they would always come down and perhaps have a little small meal, okay? But what I learned from them was that they came to the community support program to rest because they were homeless. They would spend the entire day at the community at our community support center, but however, they would spend the nights riding the light rail all night long in order to stay warm, to stay safe. And they felt that the community support center was a place in which, one, they wouldn't be judged. Two, they felt safe being there in that community. They could get a cup of coffee. They can get, they can also get something to eat, okay? And they can also be socially engaged when they wanted to be engaged. But what was most important too, Megan, is that they were actively looking for housing every morning. And what was keeping them focused, together, alive, so to speak, was that, you know what, one day we're going to get that house. We don't know if it's going to be tomorrow, it's going to be next week. And yes, times are very hard for us now. We don't have a lot of family here. We don't have a lot of friends and so forth, okay? But what's keeping us alive and keeping us focused upon our mental health, keeping us focused upon our marriage, is that, you know what, that house is going to come one day. And it was just a great lesson for me as far as kind of to not judge, not make assumptions, but when you actually kind of take time to stop and engage with people, you learn so much about them. And that couple taught me so much about learning to slow down and really to engage and talk with people. And that my program wasn't my program, it was their program. And they became a part of my program in order to, one, get rest, to be safe, but also two, to get that strength and power to get that house one day. So that was very helpful and very encouraging for me to learn. The last story I want to share is when I was an advanced employment coach. And at this particular company, we had a very good habit of, one, helping individuals who were experiencing generational poverty to get training, to get encouragement, to find that entry-level job. We would also, when it was applicable, we would hire people to work for us when we had openings. And it was very interesting because there were a lot of individuals who were maybe one day, you know, I'm their coach or I'm their teacher in one of my employment classes. And then next year, now they're my colleague, you know. And for some of our coworkers at that time, that was very intimidating for them because the dream and the possibility of having that that job that's going to sustain them, that's going to help them to take care of their families, to have decent benefits, was achieved. But then once they obtained it, it was like, well, wait a minute, do I deserve this? Am I on your same level? But it was their resilience to say, you know, wait a minute, this was a goal of mine. This was my dream. And now I have it. So I got to push aside those thoughts of, you know, self-sabotage, those thoughts of I'm feeling inadequate, or that inner critic voice that was always going on in their head to say, no, you know, I fought hard for this. And this is not the end. Okay, this job's only the beginning of how do I go deeper into what my dream is of a living wage job. So that's another example of resilience and how I had coworkers who taught me, one, to appreciate, you know, my 9 to 5. That, you know, what I have is not something that's given to me. It's something that, you know, that's earned. And most importantly, that, you know, for some people, acquiring an opportunity like that is not just a major goal, but is uplifting. You know, and again, you know, they are individuals who are coming out of generational poverty, you know, and now they're trying to start a new way of thinking, a new way of being through this process of resilience. So those are my my 3 stories. So
Those, and you know, David, thank you for sharing each and every one of those stories and your experience. And I think that, you know, the main reason, excuse me, the main reason I was really excited to invite you here is into this platform to talk about restoration and rest as a means to build resilience, is that knowing that for a long time, 20 years or more, you now have been working with individuals who are very resilient and have had to be resilient and have grit to survive. Their barriers, their challenges are great. And it also means that their resilience is great. Their bounce back. I think when you're talking about any type of severe long-term mental health issues, and you're talking about any kind of substance abuse, addiction, the ability to bounce back is so important because, and I don't mean it in a doom and gloom way, but so often it's really hard to sustain sobriety, you know, to just have an addiction and then to be sober for the rest of your life.
Right.
Your ability to be resilient and to come back and to anchor, that was a term you used about the couple. That I just thought that, so thank you for sharing those stories. And, you know, that insight too, is when you were telling me as we were preparing for this, that the story about the couple that rode the train at night, and I know that happens in the back of my head. I know that happens. I just don't know, you know, it speaks to my level of disengagement in our community. I don't know anyone personally where that is where they have to spend the night, because in Minnesota, it gets crazy cold and there's not always a heated covered place. And that your community program allowed for a place to rest as they were looking for housing.
right.
And that rest looks different to everyone. I think that was another big takeaway, is restoration can look different
Yeah.
to everyone. So
That's
thank
right.
you. I'm I'm going to reshare my screen here. We'll go back to the presentation and kind of integrate these stories into presentation. Feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A or comments, or use that chat box there if you have any questions. All right, so the next slide, I'll just make sure that you're all seeing the slide. There is, I've got a picture of somebody who is doing some weightlifting. Is that what you're seeing on your side, David?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm just, this is an example of, as we're, enduring, our bodies need rest, when we are lifting. So this is just pointing out, how we're, there's certain times where we just have rest in our life, and we have to. When we eat, we also need to fast and allow for digestion and integration and all the energy it takes to digest. So, fasting, whether it's, long or short term, allows our body to rest. We've learned that. I think about it in terms of music, music is full of notes and sounds, but it's also filled with silent moments and rest. So we actually have, resting moments in there. So I just think about, like, it's really important that we focus on the importance of rest, and not just what can be in our particular society is uber focus on productivity and doing.
I love that image.
Oh, of the music?
Yes. Yeah.
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 And it's also interesting too, as we're kind of getting into the subject matter, is this, and we'll go into it a little more in a moment, but this concept of micro breaks, and thinking about, like, maybe Saturday and Sunday, if you happen to have those days off, or maybe they're a different day of the week, but you've got your whole note day. Is what is that day where you try to take a whole break? And I know I have done it many times in my life, and I know there's people listening in the audience here where they're working 7 days a week. And it's really hard to get that whole note in there. And I would encourage you to do whatever you can to get a whole day in there. Maybe it's a half day. And then looking at, like, these little notes. I didn't even know this one existed, to be honest. I knew about the 16th note, but what are those micro breaks that we take? Maybe it's 10-minute walk around the block. Maybe it's going up and down the staircase in our building, however that looks.
We've got a question from Jennifer.
Great.
Asking, could you please share the grit slide again?
Oh, sure. Yes. And we'll, Jennifer, happy to send you this presentation too. So I'll bring that back here for you. Happy to do that. This is the one. Is it this one? Guts, resilience, initiative,
Yep,
and tenacity. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. And we will share the presentation too. Okay. So I thought that was kind of great. I was absolutely thrilled to stumble upon this amazing work by Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith. I am definitely going to go get this book out of the library. And if I can't get it at the library, I'm going to buy it at the bookstore. Sacred Rest. Recover your life, renew your energy, restore your sanity. How perfect for tonight's presentation. So this is her TED Talk. If we had more time, I would completely play it here. The sound quality is not always the best over Zoom. So I will share that link with you too in the presentation and the follow-up. But she goes over 7 types of rest that we all need. Okay, you're gonna let me go ahead here. Okay, and specifically, she goes into these 7 areas of types of rest deficiency. Rest, she calls it rest deficit. Physical, mental, sensory, creative, emotional, and social. I thought that one was so interesting, learning the difference between the emotional and social. I really thought they went together. And that emotional and mental went together, but she really differentiates them. And then spiritual. She does point out in her recording and in her book that fatigue can be associated with numerous health problems, and that you should always seek medical assistance to rule out that there's not something going on, Lyme disease or adrenal fatigue, in the medical sphere. And then, but I can tell you myself, my clients, our staff, my colleagues are feeling a definite fatigue. And we'll talk about Zoom fatigue in a minute. That would be considered probably under the mental and sensory deficit, rest deficit, as she describes it. So we'll go through each of these different 7 here. The first one is the need for physical rest. Each and every one of ourselves, our bodies, needs physical rest. And you have either passive rest through sleeping and napping, which I feel like I've become quite a pro at the nap business now that we're in this pandemic. I just feel like almost every day, about 3 to 4 o'clock, I'll take a 20 to 30 minute nap and just rest real quick, and then kind of just relax.
I could get better with that, really. No, really. I mean, power naps are incredible, but I never do it like I should do it. But
I find that like I focus better after.
Yep.
I mean, the concept of siesta, and I was like, I think that there's definitely something right about that. I know, everybody's got different sleep patterns and so forth, but I've grown to become quite a cat napper, I'll say.
Okay, all right.
The active physical rest is really interesting. It sounds kind of paradoxical, but it's when we're actually resting our body through yoga, stretching, and massage therapy. And I'm currently in physical therapy myself. I had an injury with my shoulder, and I know that doing the exercises every day is very restorative. And so it's interesting how, and we're going to talk about this a little more too, is rest and restoration are not necessarily the exact same thing, even though that word rest is within restoration. So Dr. Sandra talks about mental rest and the importance of taking short breaks, if you can, every 2 hours, even a micro break. You've been sitting at your desk for a whole hour. It's important to get up and just move and just shake a little bit and to take your eyes off the screen. It's really important to do that mental rest. And then another suggestion she has is, before you're going to bed, or if there's a time when you're really trying to give your brain a rest, and it always happens for me, is when I'm trying to rest, ideas and thoughts will come up. Oh, I should have done. Oh, I forgot. Oh my gosh, what if? And she said to just take a notebook and to write down those nagging thoughts, and then just let them go and just say, okay, now I'll remember and I'll do this later. But to write it down, get it out, and then move into that rest piece.
I keep a pen and a piece of paper at my nightstand, because I noticed that I wake up in the middle of the night and my mind starts racing about work or about a meeting, and I have to make myself stop. I write it down, go back to sleep.
And that's a great sign, as she talks in her book, that when we are having the thoughts come up, which totally happens to me every single night, that is a sign that we have a rest deficit. So it's also
from Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks.
She's saying that this is awesome. This is an awesome tip. My mind replays everything that I didn't get done as I'm trying to get to sleep. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man. Sensory rest. So this is so interesting, because I would have thought mental and sensory rest kind of were the same thing. They might go hand in hand a little bit, similar thing, which is resting our eyes, taking our eyes off the monitor, looking outside. It's important to close our eyes in the middle of the day. You know what? Driving in the car, I find that I have to remind myself to turn off the radio and just focus on driving rather than the noise. Intentionally unplugging from electronics at the end of the day. And then what I'm going to call my whole note day is, for me right now, it's Sundays. Sundays I don't turn on my phone at all. I don't charge it till night. I let the battery drain out on Saturday so that I'm not even tempted to use it. Yeah, it means that I rely on my husband to pick up texts from our teenagers. But, you know, I think I always feel better at the end of the day because I'm not checking the news, and I find myself checking on things that I really don't need to. This picture here is of a woman in what's called a flotation tank. And there's actually a place in the Twin Cities area that provides a service where you pay, I think it's like $90. And I'm sure there's some coupon if you sign up on their website to go and to be in the sensory tank with very calming music, really low lights, and it's warm with, I think, Epsom salts. And so it's very relaxing for 60 minutes or something like that. I would love to try it someday. But what for me, I will do this at least once or twice a week, is just go into the bathroom, have a bath, a warm bath, and shut off the lights and just like try to have just quiet and calm. And sometimes if I'm with it enough, I'll put some music on my phone far away from the tub. That's very relaxing, and just chill out and have that sensory, as still as possible. Our lives in this year, in this century, this millennium, how is it not sensory overload all the time?
Yeah.
I don't know if our ancestors, without the acclimations we've had through our life, would be able to survive. I mean, I'd be curious to see, if you were to, pop them into the future.
Oh, sure. And, and it's something about this sensory rest, because it is so important. In particular, someone like me, where I'm so fascinated with technology, and I want to use it, and I want to incorporate it in my life. But it can be an overload at times where I need to go back to how I was 10, 15 years ago, where I did exist without a cell phone. I did exist without all my smart hubs around my house. And it's helpful, very helpful.
Jennifer just made a comment here. I believe our forefathers would go crazy if they were to be transported into our current world with sensory overload. I really think so too. I think it's a fascinating concept. I'm sure somebody will make a movie about it.
Yeah.
Maybe they already have. Dr. Sandra talks about social rest, and this one, David, we were having some conversations around the work, Dr. Claudia Hammond's work on the art of rest, and we'll go into that in just a moment. But in her work, she really talks about the need for not isolation, but solitude, I would say, internal charging, recharging, and recovery. And Dr. Sandra talks about this concept of social rest, which is interacting with another person that leaves you feeling fuller than you started. So you're not feeling a sense of fear of disapproval or rejection. So you're not having to manage and regulate yourself. You can truly be authentically yourself. You have freedom to be yourself with another person. And I hope that each and every one of us listening, on this call, listening to this recording, has at least one or more people in their lives that you can do that with and for. I know that in my life, there's been times when I've had that, and there's been times when I haven't. It kind of ebbs and flows. But I think that's just such an important part of restoration and getting back to where we were, and getting back and having resilience, is having someone we can truly talk to and be authentic and say, today is not a good day. I'm having a hard time, and not have to hide it.
I think too, what's important with social rest is being intentional about it. And what I mean by that is, I'm very intentional about paying my bills. I'm intentional about making sure that I, see my favorite TV show at this time on this date every week. I'm very intentional at making sure that I do my taxes. But sometimes we're not very intentional in making sure that we're connecting with people who are important for us, who fill us, who allow us the ability to have a dialogue where you can feel vulnerable. You can feel that you can be transparent and not judged. So I'm very intentional that, there are people in my life that I make sure, what, we're gonna get together every Saturday morning this month and do X, Y, and Z. Or you know what, we've got a standing, coffee meeting that we have on this particular day. And I find that it's very fulfilling for me to make sure that just as all the other stuff is important to me, paying bills, taxes, doing X, Y, and Z, TV shows, that this is also very much important for me also to make sure that it's a part of my life that sustains me and keeps me whole.
David, we've got a question here I think is so good. I would like some tips on how to let go of toxic, needy friends that continue to suck my energy. The issue is that my good energy friends have been too busy to engage with me. So to have social engagement, I continue to allow these people into my life. So I'm assuming you're saying individuals who you really can't be authentic with yourself, that you do have to put on a protective guard to be around in one way or another. And I'm guessing each and every one of us has had that experience multiple times, probably. So David, I wonder if you have any suggestions about, letting go of individuals who are toxic.
Sure. Going back to my time as a advanced employment coach, many of the participants that I worked with who were not just looking for an entry-level job to sustain themselves and their families, but they were also, as they were trying to move towards that goal, is to try to leave behind behaviors, situations, activities that were barriers to them achieving their goals. And the one thing that we would always talk about in our coaching sessions is that you can't allow yourself to be a dumping ground for other people. Okay. You've got to be very upfront, very honest, very transparent that, you can't dump your mess on me. Okay. If you're going to come into my zone, this is the type of conversations that I engage in. This is the type of energy that I like to feed off of or give away. And if you're not about that, then you have to make the choice then not to enter my zone. Because it was very interesting here in her last part of her sentence, she says, I continue to allow these people into my life. So maybe tonight is the choice that you maybe don't continue to allow that to happen and allow those people to make better choices about what zone they want to be in.
Yeah, I wonder too, if there's some potential, and sometimes it's the case and sometimes it's not, where the toxic people could actually be trained to not be toxic with you. And sometimes, like I said, that's possible, and sometimes it's not. It depends on their level of self-awareness. And I think about it in terms of, dog training too, is we can sometimes hopefully train ourselves, our dogs, we can train to do different behaviors. It's harder when it's a new behavior versus if it's a brand new relationship and setting up and maintaining those boundaries. But I think we all continue to grow. And I really appreciate this question. I really resonate with it because honestly, I have had that in my life. I probably still do if I sit down and think about it. And I know, I'll be honest, I've been that toxic person, and every now and then I still am. And to gain that self-awareness of, oh, wow, that was not helpful. And I really want to point out the work of a local author and speaker named Dr. Verna Price. She is amazing, and she has, and I will in the follow-up send the link for her YouTube video where she talks about techniques for eliminating this type of toxicity in your life to really gain that social rest that you need. And one of the techniques she uses is kind of it's a halftime approach, which is, okay, so the last time I got on the phone with my friend, my cousin, my aunt, my mother, whoever, and it was 1 hour of listening to her rant or rave or he, whatever. So the next time I'm going to make a clear choice that it's going to be a half an hour. So I'm going to let them go to town and say what they're going to say. And I'm going to have something prepared in my mind, whereas, wow, it sounds like you're really having a hard time. I'm so glad you called and shared with me. I have to go, or I have to go in 15 minutes, or somehow create something and give it a halftime. The next time they call, you give them 15 minutes. The next time they call, you give them 7.5 minutes. And you start to wean them and yourself off of it. And you just keep going down as far and as much as you can. Because honestly, if you just don't pick up the phone, you're probably going to have a huge confrontation and you're going to have to deal with a lot of conflict. And it's just very interesting to hear Dr. Price talk about that technique. So I really want to, I'll definitely share that with you. But I just want to point out here, we got about 5 more minutes. I cannot believe how fast time flies. So I'm going to just go through a couple last ones. And wow, this one goes right into that question, the need for emotional rest. So I'm going to guess our questioner there has a rest deficit in the emotional area, which is the need to establish and keep strong boundaries, be honest and authentic. And it's okay to say no. It's okay to say no.
Also too, in this emotional rest, it helps you to conserve energy.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that it conserves your own energy, you know, to have that emotional rest, but also too, it saves you putting a whole lot of energy into other people that are being toxic in your environment too.
And having those boundaries increases your resilience, your own bounce back.
That's right. Yeah.
So a couple of other really fun ones. Creative rest is she suggests, you know, to spark your creativity, is to display things you love, to listen to music you love. You can decorate your cubicle, your workspace. I loved how this person did that with that yellow, just the bright, happy colors and pictures and so forth. Spiritual rest is so important. And it's not, I just want to point out, for many people, it's not necessarily a religious affiliation or a religious community. For many people, it is. But having something that cultivates a deep sense of belonging, love, acceptance, and purpose, and engaging in something that's bigger than just ourselves and our problems and our issues, through prayer, meditation, and community involvement. So those are the 7 types of spiritual or rest needs that we have as humans, according to Dr. Sandra. I do want to give you this information about the art of rest, how to find respite in the modern age. This is the work of Claudia Hammond. She has something called the rest test. So I'll send you that link. 18,000 people have shared with her and her research team how they best rest. So these might be some things for all of you to walk away with and some tips. Number 10 on the list of 18,000 individuals who described ways they best like to rest was mindfulness. So it could be meditation, watching TV. I don't know who doesn't say this, even though maybe you think, oh, it's not that, you know, is it that great for us, or it's part of screen time, but it actually provides rest for people. So there it is, Netflix. Daydreaming, going off into la la land is important. Taking a nice hot bath, walking, doing nothing in particular. I love that. That's kind of my favorite one. Listening to music. 3 is just spending time in solitude. 2 is spending time in nature. And then the last one, number 1, is Reading. So this is worldwide, the rest test, and how people tend to actually rest and restore. So we are so grateful that you joined us here tonight.